Welcome to the Curious Advantage podcast, an exploration of the idea of curiosity and its increasing importance for thriving in the digital age, from the authors of The Curious Advantage.
Hello and welcome to this episode of the Curious Advantage podcast. My name is Paul Ashcroft. I'm one of the co-authors of the book, The Curious Advantage. And today I'm here with my co-author, Garrick Jones.
Hello.
We are delighted today to be joined by Edward Oakeley. Edward is a scientist and he has an amazing set of methods that are having a big impact in his labs. Hello, Edward.
Hello.
Edward, please tell us a little bit about yourself and the work that you do.
Well, thank you for having me. I am a research lab head involved in studying gene regulation and genome instability, and my team is comprised of people who do laboratory experiments, and also we have many discussions with our partners to help design and manage our projects.
Now, I know, Edward, you are being reticent just about how impactful your work is. And the reason why we wanted to speak with you, of course, is because your laboratories are having a great impact in your area. And there's something about what you do and how you run those laboratories that has a huge impact on the outcomes that you're getting. And we wanted to explore that a little bit more with you. You could say we're curious about what it is you're doing that's making this difference. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
One of the things that I realized, having spent many years in meetings, is how inefficient meetings are. Meetings often involve a presenter who talks at great length and great excitement about some topic or other, not necessarily with the best possible slide deck or presentation skills. And the audience frequently become distracted. They may be very busy, they may have other things on their mind, and they will use their time in the meeting perhaps to check their emails or to at least not pay full attention to what is being said.
Isn't that true?
As a result, we have meetings where the return on investment for our company is quite low. A lot of people not paying attention. If you ask them questions about the meeting immediately afterwards, they may remember some of it, but perhaps 1 or 2 days later, they don't even remember the meeting at all. And so I was very interested in finding a way to improve the return on investment, not only for our company, but also for the participants, so that we can actually remember what is said and ask questions rather than listen to dull presentations.
How is this different from what normally goes on?
You can imagine the meeting could be summarized as, what is it that the company needs from us and what do we need from the company? What is the goal of the meeting? What are we trying to achieve? And what are we empowered to do? And then ask the questions specifically around those points. When the meeting is done and we have reached our conclusion, the meeting should stop. It is not required to spend an hour if you are finished in 20 minutes.
That's brilliant. Tell me, how do you know when the meeting has ended? What is it about this method that is getting these results?
So if you start a meeting with a specific goal in mind, so we say the objective of this meeting is to make this decision or to choose what to do next in an experiment or part of the project, then we can say, given that, what do we have to agree on? And it is not about the background or endless discussions and politics, but rather what do we actually need to do? So we discuss the impact, the connections, and what we will do next. And once we have agreed on what we will do next, then it is over.
How is this having an impact in the laboratory work? Why is this very simple approach having such an impact in your laboratories?
The impact on the laboratory it's something that we've actually been doing for quite some time, having these kinds of discussions. Where I think the impact becomes broader is if you say the person who is facilitating the meeting or engaging in asking the key questions, ideally would not be part of the team. So that level of independence is key. So instead, what I have been doing together with other people from other departments is to join their meetings and to ask questions and also to assist them in their programs. The advantage of that is by being independent, the questions are not seen as leading to a particular hidden agenda.
Edward, is there something about the quality of the questions that you're asking? Is there something different about how you're using questions and the type of questions you're using as part of this process?
One thing about a question is it should be there to elicit an answer that you will listen to, not a statement of opinion disguised as a question. I could ask a long question that says, I see that you're doing this, and I think that, and therefore this. Instead, a question that is more open as, how does this benefit the project? What is the result from this? How does this help? Leaving it open to the participant to provide their feedback. Listen to what they say, and at the end of what they've said, provide a brief summary of what you've heard to ensure understanding. That's also important if the person speaking is not very brief.
I'm also interested in the experience of people. How do they react to this as an approach? And also in particular, how do people react when you, for example, are sitting in on meetings that you wouldn't normally be part of? One of the things we talk about in our book is about being able to be critical about the work that you are focused on and being able to stand back from that. So what's the experience do you find of people being involved in this as a process, whether it's something that is their topic or something actually that you are doing independently with them?
It is never forced upon people. We have set up a kind of small organization around the concept, and teams are invited to participate. Often a team has a problem. Often a team has a challenge of some kind. In these cases, we can sit with the team, perhaps discuss what it is that they're hoping to resolve, what it is that the next step might be, and then have a discussion and structure the discussion as we go through. And in this case, people are more open to the idea of someone independent because it is seen more like an independent meeting facilitator, and there is nothing new to that. The only difference here is about making the questions more focused on their actual beginning need. So if they said the goal of the meeting is this and they're going off topic, can we bring them back on topic?
And what do you call this approach, Edward?
It's broken into two pieces. We call it projects as questions because historically you just had projects or questions and the two were somewhat separate. Now we think of them as the same. A project is all about the questions that you ask, the challenges that you take, and the reimagining your decisions as you go through it. Nobody knows the start, nobody knows the end. Only once you begin do you realize what you were wrong about. It is called Projects as Questions.
You're listening to the Curious Advantage podcast, inspired by the book The Curious Advantage, written by Paul Ashcroft, Simon Brown, and Garrick Jones. Subscribe to the podcast today.
Without giving too much away, can you tell us some stories about where you've used it?
It started with a project that was a mini sabbatical, a fixed-term project of exactly 18 months. The original idea came from a conversation at a Christmas party, and the two main participants, myself and one of my lab associates, really were not experts in the field that the project was describing. But we managed to somehow convince the management that this would be a great thing to work on. Having been funded, in 18 months, we had to talk to many people and test many things, evolving as we went. The project changed dramatically from what we thought in our Christmas party experiment, but it was all about networks. We had to reach out to people who might be able to help. We spoke to them, they spoke to us, we asked their opinion. We were the leaders of the projects, but they were the experts in their field. And that changed the power dynamic tremendously. And they helped us because they became interested in the project. And we supported them because the questions that we asked made them feel valued.
Edward, have you seen this working outside of a scientific context?
Since then, we have established a program of doing this with many other teams. It has been done with people in finance, people in procurement, people in education, and all of these teams have gained something of value from it. In fact, many of them have come back one or more times for additional questions. The point is, any project can be split into a series of what do I need, what do I get, and where am I stuck at the moment? And it doesn't matter if it's science or if it's accounting, there's always a challenge that keeps you awake.
Now, Edward, you and I have had a conversation before, and you were talking to me then about this, projects as questions, but you've also talked about something which you call learning to remember. I was wondering if you could tell us a little bit about learning to remember and why you're so passionate about it.
If you listen to somebody, it is important to remember what they say, especially if they will take part in a future conversation in a meeting some weeks from now. Short-term memory is great, but we are defined by what we remember. So, learning to remember comes from a challenge that I had at school. My 16-year-old self was not very good at remembering things. I got kind of middling grades for everything. My biology teacher was very annoyed at this because he felt I should have had a better grade. So he introduced me to a concept that comes from ancient Greece, which is known as the method of Loki. This is a trick for remembering events based on the position that they take in a story that you build on your way to work or around your house, in order to put some strong memory associated to weak memory ideas. The trick is not only about position, but also about any trick which helps to encode senses of smell, taste, touch, and memory all into one place. The goal with the learning to remember is to teach people these very simple tricks, because if you can find a way of encoding something quickly and easily, then you don't forget it. And if you don't forget it, you can use it later. And by having a limited repertoire of ways of remembering, it also helps to build connections between conversations from one day to the next. Let me give you an example. Imagine if you want to remember something which is coloured yellow. Yellow itself is very hard to remember. But if you one time bite on a lemon and you remember the taste of the lemon, then that shock taste of lemon you can associate with yellow. And yellow then can be used as a memory hook for anything else that may work with it. For example, lemon is bitter. The speaker today has orange hair and he is very nice and presenting well. So you could say orange is not bitter. The nice presenter can be reminded from the opposite of the bitter lemon.
A curious culture is a game changer. What does curiosity mean for you? Follow #CuriousAdvantage and join the conversation.
Edward, you say this comes from ancient Greece. Tell us, if our listeners want to find out more about loci and learning to remember, where would you recommend they go?
There are a number of TED Talks which help to describe the use of memory tricks for learning the orders of decks of cards or shopping lists, and also that describe some of the original Greek process. The story comes originally from, imagine a day before the internet, when you couldn't Google the answer, and in fact, perhaps you couldn't even read or write. A lot of communication happened around campfires. So there was this tradition of bards and orators, where somebody around a campfire would tell a story, and then the next person would tell a story, and the next. You would probably only hear that story one time in your life. But if it's a great story, it's nice when you're sitting at the next campfire some weeks from now, you can remember the much better story that was told by the person opposite you. And so the orators and public speakers started to find ways of helping themselves to remember the stories that were told. And that is where it comes from.
Edward, one of the other things people, as they get older, we found forget to remember is to be curious. We'll start being curious as children, but somehow along the way we seem to lose that. Are you still personally curious? How are you curious in a day-to-day way?
It is a difficult question to ask of someone how curious you are, but I think I am as curious as I have ever been. And I feel that the memory tricks for learning to remember help with that curiosity, because like with the lemon example, every time I think of a lemon, all of the memories that are linked to lemon bubble up in the background and are kind of going as a little background chat. And what you get from that is you suddenly start to see connections between things that you have heard that perhaps you'd never seen before. So when walking or when cycling to work or doing something when you're not concentrating, you suddenly see something which makes a connection. And that connection makes you go, I wonder, what if? Couldn't it be like that? Let's try it. And that, I think, is the origin of curiosity, the spotting patterns and connections and asking why. Curiosity is making connections to things that you remember.
Edward, that's brilliant. What's the most exciting discovery that you as a scientist have ever made?
The most valuable discovery that I made is when doing presentations and talking to people, not being afraid to do rough sketches and doodles rather than perfect production graphics is very important. But from a scientific point of view, I had a paper some years ago where I was able to look at changes in how genes are altered when a grain of pollen germinates in a dish, and to look at it in colour with photographic images that were very compelling of the changes during the maturation of a pollen grain.
It's interesting for me that you get excited both by the technical stuff that you've discovered, but you're also excited about the methods that you use to inquire. I'm taken by the fact that you talk about doodles and sketching as a really important way to communicate and an important way to create memory. How do you use doodles and sketching in your everyday work?
I think of myself in part as an artist rather than a scientist. The barrier between the two is often overplayed. It is much easier to quickly draw a few random squiggles on a piece of paper than it is to type long sentences. When you draw the squiggles, you don't be afraid of lines that are in the wrong place. Cross things out, connect things together. And eventually, very quickly, you start to see again the patterns. Also, by using a pen rather than a mouse, it's much easier for my mind to make the connections again. There's something very evocative about using your hand and a pencil to draw out an idea as you think.
Do you keep your doodles and your sketches in an archive somewhere?
Yes, I do. When I was a student, I did a summer job in the patent office in London. And so my doodles and sketches are all signed and dated.
Excellent. For the last question, what would be the key takeaway for people listening to this conversation?
I think the key takeaway is that you have the power to do it yourself. These are skills which anyone can learn, but like with any skill, you need to practice. So feel empowered. No one is superhuman. Anyone can do these things. Just desire that you wish to do it.
That's great advice, Edward. Thank you so much for joining us today. It's a pleasure to have you with us.
Thank you.
Thank you for listening to the Curious Advantage podcast. The Curious Advantage book is now available to purchase on Amazon. Subscribe to the podcast today. Follow #CuriousAdvantage and join the conversation. This podcast is produced by Aliki Paolinelis and John McGinty and edited by Jill Damatac-Futter.